Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at a really good underground comic from 1978, kind of late in the game of undergrounds. Banzai, #1. I think this is the only issue. It's from Kitchen Sink Enterprises, and this was kind of like a three-way comic. It was Kim Deitch, Joel Beck, and Roger Brandt. I think those guys all grew up together, or at least in the comic scene. Young adults, they knew each other, they're friends, so they decided to collaborate on this underground. Of course, once again, Kim Deitch steals the show. He usually does whenever he's in an anthology. Usually the best shit in any anthology is Kim Deitch. And I'm not huge fans of Beck and Brandt. But it's some pretty fun, interesting stuff from those guys. But, of course, Kim Deitch is why we're here. I love this logo. It's like the old Batman logo, but kind of changed. And here we see the three artists. And let's look at this. Inside front cover by Joel Beck. We've talked about Joel Beck before. He's kind of an odd underground cartoonist because all of his stuff is pretty PG rated. He's just a gag cartoonist. I mean, this could be, well, if it was a little slicker, it could be in Mad Magazine or Cracked or something. This is just a comic about him starting out as a cartoonist in the early 60s. And he got so tired of being rejected for his traditional cartooning, he decided to go off and go in a wild direction, kind of undergroundy. Because Joel Beck was one of the first underground cartoonists. He was there right at the beginning. So after he makes some naughty comics of a mouse making it with a duck, kind of implying that it's like Disney where he was trying to work. So he comes in showing off his work, take a look at this. You guys rejected me, and look what I did to your characters. But all the cartoonists get a kick out of it. I think it's hilarious. And they're not offended or outraged. They're just like, hey, this is great stuff. Stick with it, kid. So he's just confused. He's just like, oh, I didn't expect that reaction. Yeah, Joel Beck, he's got a kind of cute cartoon style, but yeah, he's never really impressed me that much. Okay, here we have, this is so good. Kim Deitch doing Noodles Punctured Romance. And escaped fugitive Noodles Romanoff is making tracks in a stolen car. And the cops are hot on his heels. For some reason, this cop car is a VW Bug, it looks like. And Noodles has got a blow-up sex doll who he thinks is real. Thinks it's his girlfriend. So he's basically telling the cops to go fly a kite, and the cops are like, you asked for it. And they fire at the sex doll and puncture its neck, and he crashes at a shock. So the sex doll is totally deflated. I'm sorry, I just love the way Kim Deitch draws this character. It just makes me laugh. And he says, come on, Noodles, time to go back to the crazy house, because I guess this guy always escapes and gets into trouble. He's got a rich dad who always bails him out of trouble. That's how he can get away with it. So he goes back to the adult bookstore where Noodles stole the sex doll from. And he's like, here's the doll he stole. He's like, what's this? I'm going to press charges. And it's kind of weird. This cop is kind of like a nice guy. He's like, listen, he just escaped from the loony bin. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's like, you're lucky I don't run you in for running this porn shop. And the guy's like, okay, settle down. Fine. And then we see back at the sanitarium. Noodles is like, oh, well, there'll be other girls, I suppose. He's totally deluded. And we see a cameo of Nate Mishkin, the long-term Kim Deitch character who is friends with Waldo the cat. And one of the orderlies is saying, Mr. Mishkin, don't you be throwing that chicken on the floor. Because he thinks he's feeding Waldo, his imaginary friend. But it just looks like he's throwing the chicken on the floor. And we have a little epilogue where Noodle's rich father and mother get the call, and they're like, hey, you got to pay for this car, that, you know, the dented fender. And the father says basically like, I'm tired of paying for that crazy son all the time. I'm not going to do it. And the wife just goes back to the phone. Mr. Romanoff says it's perfectly all right. Just send him the bill. Love it. This is a kind of nice little autobio story because, you know, it's about these crazy 60s bohemians. It's by Roger Brandt in More Innocent Times. And he's just reminiscing about in like early 66, he lived in a house with all these crazy roommates. Deanna and her little kid. She's a single mom. And she's a secretary at the police station. This guy, Les, who's dating this woman, Nina, who's kind of older and kind of weird looking. She looks like a grandma or something. Les seems to be quite the character. He could eat light bulbs, actually. So I guess Nina was starting to feel kind of weird about being older than everyone, so she went to live with her mom, like 200 miles away. But she'd always call and be like, you're sleeping with Deanna, the single mom, I know it. So she gets so jealous that she actually calls the cops in the house because she knows they've got reefer. Everyone in the house was a big pothead. So the cops come, and it's kind of interesting, him talking about these cops, and one of them actually is a nice guy who finds his Early Mad and Humbugs by Kurtzman. And he actually is reminiscing about them and like talking to him about like, did you ever read Trump? And Two-Fisted Tales. And so they book everyone because they just find some seeds, but it's enough to get you arrested. So they take him down to the station. Of course, Deanna works there. So all of her coworkers are like, Deanna, what the hell? And they search everyone. It just shows what it's like getting arrested, all the weird little things that happen. But then he gets bailed out. Deanna and her boyfriend come down and bail him out. And here's Roger Brandt today in 1978, I guess. Just still smoking joints. Here's Joel Beck again, The Great Comic Book Conspiracy. And this is kind of interesting because in 78 there were barely any comic stores. But this is about one. And these guys show up in ski masks. And they're like, show us the good stuff. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. This could be Ron Turner, I don't know. Looks like a typical comic store owner. So they torture the guy. And they don't really explain this, but I assume he's a masochist because he has this big smile on his face while this guy's beating the shit out of him. And then a hippie chick comes out and she says, stop the violence, I'll tell you where the treasure is. And she brings out a giant stack of like Captain Marvel #1, Action Comics #1, Tales from the Crypt. That's what they came there for, to steal. So they ran off with it. And I guess this guy just won't accept it. He keeps chasing them. Stop, comic books thieves. I want my comic books. Even though they get on a private jet, they fly to another country. He's still following them. I want my comic books. And they end up in the mountains of Italy. Meanwhile, the nation is in a frenzy. This actually would be major news today. If somebody stole those comics, that would be like millions of dollars. That would be high larceny. Back then, this was just like satire. Like, nobody would give a shit. But he's making it seem like they nuke New York City just in case the thieves are hiding out there. And the whole country is like, we got those comic books. This is a national travesty. Or tragedy. So back to the mountains of Italy. And these guys, it's this huge mafia guy. Kind of drawn like Marlon Brando. Because this is years after Godfather came out. And when he opens up the box, I don't know how this happened. But it's like Andy Panda comics True Romance, Bob Hope and Jerry Lewis comics. There's no Superman #1. There's no Captain America #1. And these guys don't know what happened. They're like, And then the last panel is they're all being fitted with concrete shoes, and they're going to dump them in the lake or the ocean. And still this guy is saying, I want my comic books. It's cute. That's all Joel Beck's good for. Still don't understand. He's in so many undergrounds. But I don't think he ever really drew an underground comic in his life. This is another great Kim Deitch one, The Unholy Fleas. So there's this guy, Walter Murdoch, and he's just a chronic drunk. So one night, after he's drinking 38 bottles of beer, these giant fleas come in his house with more beer. And they tie him up to a chair. And they're force-feeding him beer. And he's loving it. He's like, this is the best dream ever. I must be dreaming it, but this is great. And he's like, you guys better let me out. Let me up, I gotta pee. And they're like, no need. And they put this little pump on it, or not a pump, like a piss bottle. But it goes to a hose. It goes to a little shower head, and they put it all over his body. So as he pees, he's getting drenched in his own urine. And come the dawn, he wakes up in his pajamas in bed. His wife's there. He looks in the living room. There's not a mess. Everything looks fine. And he's like, what the hell happened? It must have been a dream. And as he eats breakfast, he says, well, one thing's for sure. I'll never touch another beer as long as I live. And then meanwhile, though, Wally's wife, Gertrude, makes a phone call. And she's like, it worked like a charm. And it's this theatrical agent. And she says, just give me a call if he ever backslides. We can do this again. And we see the two guys out of their flea. Well, they have their heads off, their flea outfits. And she's going to give him a bonus for doing such a good thing. Another Joel Beck, The Good Old Boys, Billy Bob and Jim Boy. And it's just about these kind of country bumpkin types who want to get laid. One night they're like, let's go to town, we'll get laid. So they go to the bar, and they meet this kind of cute woman. And, they say, can we buy you a drink? And she's just buying everything they're selling. It's not a hard nut to crack at all. They're just like, you want to come to my house? And she's like, all right. So these guys are ecstatic. And so they get her back to their place. And she says, my real name's Harvey. And they turn on the lights, and it's a man. It's a drag queen, or I guess back then they would have called it that, transvestite. And at first they're angry. We gotta bash your head in. But then they're all like, well, since we're already here, I won't tell if you don't, Jim Boy. And then that morning, their mother comes in. You boys ready for church? And they're totally having sex with this trans woman. This is a really neat Kim Deitch one. Anthropomorphism. And I love this logo. And he goes to town. Webster defines anthropomorphism as ascribing human characteristics to non-human things. Like funny animal comics. But of course, in old cartoons, you could even have buildings. He makes every single thing in here anthropomorphic. The raindrops have little faces on them. The telephone pole, the sun, everything. Every car. Even this pig selling magazines. The magazine is talking and has a face on it. Really nice art. And just a bunch of gags, about anthropomorphism. Showing it off. I like how the car gets home in the garage. There's a woman. She's like, welcome home, big boy. Roll into my abode. Now we got another Roger Brand story. It's like something that could be in one of the more EC-inspired undergrounds. like Fantagore, even though it's not that gory. So we got this guy, Longstain, and he's a very successful guy. And just, he's a scientist. What's the word? He's like a polymath. He knows how to do a lot of stuff. He's kind of a genius. So he even figures out like sorcery and black magic. And one day he calls up the devil. Does the traditional, selling your soul thing. So the devil says, I'll be back in 10 years for your soul, but you will fail at nothing in those next 10 years. Everything you do, you will succeed at. You'll get everything you want. So he has a beautiful wife, totally successful. But then the last few years, he starts getting freaked out. He's like, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I traded my immortal soul. So then he figures out a little plan. He works diligently, hires all these scientists to try to figure out the secret of immortality. And, he kind of figures it's not going to work. I mean, even, angels and demons and gods, they just, it's against the laws of the universe. So when the devil pops up right on time, he says, you can't take me without completing your end of the bargain. You didn't deliver me success in my last endeavor. And of course, the devil's always, is really good at dicking people over. So he says, okay, fine, you will live forever, but I'm still taking your soul. So he pulls the soul out of his body and goes back to hell. And the thing, without the soul, basically he's just like this unthinking creature who's in a perpetual spasm of eternal pain without relief, which can't comprehend itself or recognize or understand it or know itself. The foulest, basest pain, but devoid of identity or thought or feeling. So finally he just like degenerates into this like kind of a puddle of goo from smashing himself, and and he still has like his little assistant here, Bruco. Bruco's the only one who knows about what went down. So he takes the remains of him, this goop basically, puts it in a little iron box and hides it in the house. And as far as his wife and son know, Harry Jr., they think their husband took off. But the wife says, something evil happened in that house. I'll never know what, but it happened. So she's right, of course. So now we have kind of a sequel story right after it. The Longstain Taint. And his son grows up to be a very successful man, well-loved, the kind of guy who, if he endorses a politician, everyone will vote for him. His wife is beautiful. He's just everyone thinks he's a swell guy. But it turns out behind the scenes, he's a total control freak who makes his wife's life miserable. He's really just controlling and nuts. And he has mistresses, but she becomes more distant until finally she just says, I'm leaving you. I'm sick of this shit. And at first she's just like, who cares? Until she comes crawling back to me, I'll be fine. I'll have sex with some of my lovers. But then he gets the divorce papers and he's furious. He's like, how dare she? So he comes crawling back on his hands and knees. He's like, take me back, baby. Give me one more chance. And within one day, he's being a dick again. Total control freak. So she leaves him for good. Then he gets this offer. His father's old estate that we saw in the first comic. Some railway company wants to buy it for a lot of money. So he's going to inspect the house, make sure there's nothing, valuable that he's leaving behind. He hasn't been there, I think, since he was a little boy. The house has been abandoned since then. And he finds his father's diary. Roger Brand just had this, really good craft. I mean, he could have worked for the major comic companies, I think. So he finds out and he finds the black box full of his dad's goop. And when he opens it up, the goop kind of goes onto his hand and kind of starts taking him over slowly. And all of a sudden he has this craving for souls, to feed on living souls. And he starts this killing spree, basically. All he has to do is touch someone with that black hand of his, with his father's goop on it, and it steals their soul and kills them instantly. So, of course, the police are like, what the hell's going on? And we find all these murder victims, not a wound on them. There's no reason. So one night, this mugger attacks Harry Jr., and he grabs his hand and he dies. But the cops happen to be there, and they're like, that's the guy. And they chase him. And he knows he's like, the goop is taking him over. And he probably only has minutes to live. He can feel it. That within a few minutes, the goop is going to totally be in charge. But before he dies, he knows where his ex lives, the one who divorced him. And he wants to take her, kill her, steal her soul before he dies. And it happens just by happenstance. There already is a burglar in her house. So he gets in the way, and Harry Jr. touches him and steals his soul. But that's all he could take. And once he stole that soul, the thing totally takes him over. And he starts turning into goop. And the cops come, and she says, just burn the rug. They have to, like, wrap him up in the rug. Another nice Kim Deitch one, Dreams of Detente, a little one-pager. And we see Nate Mishkin again. And once again, he's in the loony bin. I love this guy. I've never seen Kim Deitch draw anything like this cartoony. And he's visited by this cartoon character. Let me see if he has a name. I can't remember. And then he opens his mouth, this giant pelican pirate, and Waldo, his imaginary friend, jumps out. And he says, I was just hanging out with Henry Kissinger at a cocktail party. And he's all like, you liar. And then the thing burps up Henry Kissinger. And then the next morning, the doctors say, hey, Michigan, I hope your first night back here at the sanitarium wasn't too bad. And he says, not really. In fact, I finally grasped what the U.S. policy of detente was all about. That's kind of obviously a very dated joke. In the early mid-70s, Kissinger was, I guess, Secretary of State still, I think. And always talking about detente between us and Russia. I think I don't quite understand what it is either. Kind of a truce, even though we weren't at war. Something like a truce or something. But it's in the newspapers every freaking day. Talks about detente. This is Joel Beck, Bert the Penguin. This is something that could be in, like, Nickelodeon magazine. This is such a, like, kid comic. And we see this guy, Bert the Penguin, and he's really neurotic. He's been reading too many things about the ecology and the greenhouse effect, and he just can't stop worrying about, our fragile Earth ecology. So, I mean, I guess he's pretty smart to do that. It's more common now. So his dolphin friend is just like, dude, lighten up. You shouldn't read so much. Stop. Whatever. Just live your life. Don't worry about everything. So this his psychiatrist shows up, Sir Kiwi, who's a Kiwi. And he basically just says, you got to go on a vacation, dude. You got to stop worrying about this stuff. And Bert recounts a scarring incident from his childhood or chickhood when he was separated from his mother. So the other penguins started pecking at him, thinking he was just an orphan. I guess that's what they do. If the mother dies of a bird, they just kill the bird because they won't have a mother to take care of him. And then Bert goes on his vacation, but when he comes crawling back like half dead, and he's like, An oil slick got me off the coast of Peru. And the dolphin is like screaming to the heavens, oh, why? He was right. This world is going to shit. He knew the truth and nobody listened. And then he says, bird, but I thought. So I arose in 3 days. So what? So Bert's sitting there happy as a clam drinking champagne. Don't understand it at all. And it's really not that funny. Okay, let's see if I got this in frame here. Kim Deitch, showing that weird pelican pirate again. The Good Life, number 275 in a series. Stolen and revised by Kim Deitch. I think this is, these were these old beer ads in like the old Life magazines. Like they were beautifully painted. And this is what the parody is of, or homage. It's weird seeing Kim Deitch draw this straight. He's just, you know, not caricatured or cartoonily. And it's kind of nice. It's just a little mission statement, maybe. The Bogus Three. And just talking about their standards. They proudly stand behind every smirk, gag, snide remark, outrageous lie, and pun. And this is them just jamming. Pretty nice border art here. So these random goofy characters and our three creators. So that's it, Banzai number 1. A really nice underground. I mean, just for the Kim Deitch alone. Really good stuff. And, you know, Brandon Beck. There's worse out there. It's not the worst shit I've ever read. I like Brand's storytelling. He's does these elaborate little stories in 4 pages. It's kind of fun, but not as fun as our Kim Deitch. So I guess that's it. And I hope you come back here to the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.